Good morning from the Parish Hall of the Church of the Redeemer in Ruston, Louisiana. This is session 2, and today we are studying the colors that are used in the vestments that the clergy wear, and also the vestments or paraments or hangings that are used in the church. Let me see here. That's better. Okay. A normal task for the altar guild is, well, you would really like to know what color is going to be used. And of course, one thing you can do, you could always call the priest up on the telephone, and you can say to him or her, "Father, are we in green or are we in white?" or whatever. And the other thing you can do is you can look on the liturgical calendar. We use the more fancy high church version of the calendar that's called the Churchman's Ordo calendar, and the one that I use is a little bit more mainstream Episcopal calendar called the Episcopal Church Year Guide, but the Ashby Company does both of them. You can also look on the back of each page, and it gives you the lessons for that day, provided it's a Sunday or a major holy day. So you need to be able to find the day on a current liturgical calendar. And as you know, the color of the number on the calendar is the color that is supposed to be used. And so the other way you can do it is like the clergy do it, and that is you can try to understand what liturgical day is being celebrated. Is the day that is being celebrated, is it within a season such as the season of Easter, or the season after Pentecost, or the season of Christmas, or the season of Advent? Is it a ferial day? A ferial day means it's not a feast day. Is it a day of a season, or is it a saint's day, or is it some other major or minor feast? And that should tell you that in the square of each day on the calendar. It gives you the number in a color, and it also says at the bottom of the square what day is being celebrated. So that's important to know. And our altar guild is very well informed, and our altar guild knows that for the 50 days of Easter, with the exception of the 50th day of Easter, the day of Pentecost, we use white. On the 50th day of Easter is the day of Pentecost, and the day of Pentecost we use red. But on the first weekday after Pentecost, we go back to green. Days which use white vestments. White vestments and hangings are the seasons that are joyful. And these include the Easter season and the Christmas season. In the Episcopal Church, although not in some other churches, weddings and baptisms are in white. The exception to that would be if a baptism is held on the day of the bishop's visitation and the bishop is wearing red, or if it's on the day of Pentecost and the color of the day is red, or if it's Holy Cross Day and the color of the day is red, then you would probably use red vestments that day. But most of the time, almost all the time, weddings are in white, and baptisms outside of the day of Pentecost or perhaps a bishop's visitation, baptisms are in white as well. And then there are saints' days that if these saints were not martyrs, then the color of that day is white if that saint was not a martyr or an apostle or an evangelist. If it is All Saints' Day, the color is white. The bright color of white, or white with gold, or gold, symbolizes joy, purity, and holiness. And since white also is the color of the Easter season, white is believed to symbolize the resurrection of Christ. And we use white for funerals, including the funeral pall these days. Now, when I was first an Episcopalian, I was confirmed in 1971, it was a big deal to get your church to buy a brand new funeral pall in white. And most of them were in purple in those days. By the way, the other thing that we do in funerals that symbolizes the resurrection of Christ is that we burn the Paschal candle. The Paschal candle is burned on all of the days of the season of Easter. We also burn the Paschal candle at funerals, and we also burn the Paschal candle at baptisms and confirmations. And it symbolizes the presence of the risen Christ, because we light the Paschal candle at the Easter Vigil. Some days use red vestments, and red symbolizes fire or blood. And we remember especially the tongues of fire at Pentecost, and we remember red for the blood of martyrs. And many of the saints that we celebrate were martyrs, and so their liturgical color is red. Many Christians died as martyrs during the 2nd and 3rd centuries of our era. We only have a smattering of the things that Christians wrote in the 2nd century. We have a lot, but it's nothing compared to what was originally written down. And in the 3rd century, a lot of Christians died as martyrs as well. The color of the day of Pentecost is also red, for the tongues of fire on that original day of Pentecost. We now, in the Episcopal Church, and this is not in canon law nor in the prayer book, but it is now customary to use red for the evangelists. And the evangelists, in case you're wondering, are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, two of whom, Matthew and John, were apostles. And they're in red because it symbolizes the Holy Spirit who inspired them. And all of the apostles, we use red for their day. And all of the apostles were martyrs with the one exception of St. John the Evangelist, which had traditionally been white. It's one of the days very quickly following after Christmas. We also now use red for Holy Week, including Palm Sunday and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in Holy Week, and indeed Maundy Thursday, and that's a change. Maundy Thursday used to be in white because it was all about the institution of the Holy Eucharist. I would prefer it really to be in white myself. And then Good Friday should be in red. And frequently, if you have a real serious Holy Week set, you would want the red set for Holy Week or for martyrs to be a dark red, an oxblood color, since it symbolizes the blood of Christ. And red vestments are frequently used for ordinations and confirmations, although white is often used instead. My first ordination was on the feast of the Confession of Peter, which is, that day is January 18th. Well, that day fell on a Sunday, so we transferred it to January 19th, the day of my ordination. And since the color of the day was white, I wore white, and the bishop wore white, and the other clergy wore stoles that were white. So we didn't use red at all for that ordination. But you can do, if the bishop comes in the season of Easter, you'd probably use white for a confirmation because it is the season of Easter. Now, some days where you wear purple vestments. Purple is a darker color, and the darker color symbolizes penitence, namely being sorry for our sins. Purple is used for Lent. Some churches use a more simple pattern where they use like an unbleached color and a black or dark red cross on it, and that is called a Lenten array. Some people have their altar dressed in with a black cross or a red cross and unbleached, and that is referred to as a Lenten array. You would see that in the Church of England a lot. But normally purple is used for Lent, and it's usually used for Advent as well. Following the Salisbury use, or the Sarum use, Sarum being Latin for Salisbury, many times Advent is in blue rather than purple. And this may suggest that Advent is not as penitential a season as Lent is. And purple is still used for Holy Week in some parishes. But you know, you wear purple for a long time during Lent. And so I think when you get those red, you know, when you put those palms in those vases and you put red on the altar, and you certainly should have veils that are red, it really gets people attention that this is not the regular Sundays of Lent. Hey, this is Palm Sunday now. So I really prefer that red is used rather than purple for Holy Week. There are 2 Sundays that you use rose vestments. Yeah, you can call it pink if you want. But the two Rose Sundays are the third Sunday of Advent and the fourth Sunday in Lent. Lent, we don't permit flowers to be used on the altar. However, on the fourth Sunday in Lent, roses are permitted on the fourth Sunday in Lent. It's the Sunday in the middle of Lent. And we actually do have a rose set, a little bit bright rose, I guess, but it is a pink set, and most Episcopal churches do not have rose sets. You know, on the Advent wreath, the third candle is a pink candle or a rose candle. But rose represents a lightening up of purple vestments, and that Sunday is called Mid-Lent Sunday or Refreshment Sunday, or in England it would be called Mothering Sunday. And I personally have made simnel cakes. The tradition is that you make a simnel cake and give people pieces of a simnel cake. We did that at St. Luke's Church in Germantown. So I personally have made simnel cakes along with the altar guild. And you give it to people on the fourth Sunday in Lent, sometimes called Mothering Sunday. Usually the lesson was, Jerusalem is above, is free, and is our mother. Okay. All right. Days which use green vestments. One liturgical season that uses green vestments is the season after Epiphany. Not on the first Sunday after Epiphany, because the first Sunday after Epiphany you use white because it celebrates the baptism of Christ. We try to do baptisms on that day. And so starting on the first weekday after the first Sunday after Epiphany, we go to green. Sometimes the last Sunday after the Epiphany is also in white. That's very optional. But the reason why is the gospel for that day often is the gospel of the transfiguration of Christ. And so to celebrate the transfiguration of Christ, and maybe to get a white Sunday in before you start going into Lent for a long, long time, you can wear white on that Sunday. The longer liturgical season in green vestments is the season after Pentecost. And this nasty term, ordinary time, is used in the Revised Common Lectionary. I hate that term. I'd much prefer to use the Roman Catholic term, Sundays per annum, Sundays in the year. There is no ordinary time in the prayer book because it says all Sundays of the year are feasts of our Lord Jesus Christ. If all Sundays are feasts and celebrate the resurrection, how exactly can you have ordinary time? So I hate that term. Green is the default setting for when the church is not celebrating a particularly joyful event, or in something like Advent and Lent, and you're using a dark color. So green is the default setting. Green symbolizes growth and growing, and that's what we're all supposed to be doing in our Christian life. Now, yes, there are black vestments. It used to be common in Roman Catholic churches and a few Episcopal churches to wear black vestments. I'm talking about chasuble, the whole schmear, a whole solemn set. Black vestments for funerals and for the liturgies of Good Friday. There's a church in Evanston, Illinois, where they have a funeral form and they actually ask people, do you want to use the black vestments at your funeral? Okay. We don't have a black set. Funerals now are almost always in white. Previously, most Episcopal churches used purple, including funeral palls. But I have not seen a purple funeral pall in the last 4 decades in this country. And I personally have never worn purple vestments at a funeral. And I've been ordained for 41 years. Okay, the veiling of crosses. Oh my God. As far back as the 1970s, before this prayer book took shape, crosses in the church were veiled in purple on Passion Sunday. Passion Sunday was the 5th Sunday in Lent. And it was not the same as Palm Sunday. These veils were purple for Passion Sunday, also Palm Sunday, and they were switched to white veils for Maundy Thursday, symbolizing the purity of the Holy Eucharist, and they were switched to black for Good Friday. And now, in this prayer book, Palm Sunday is also the Sunday of the Passion. And the common color is red for the whole of Holy Week. And that makes it easier on the altar guild, where you put those purple veils during Lent, which we didn't used to do, but you put the purple veils on the crosses, you know, like for Ash Wednesday, and you leave them on there until Palm Sunday. For Palm Sunday, you change your veils and you change your vestments from purple to red, and you leave it that way until after the Good Friday service. If you have a Holy Saturday morning service, you could leave it for that too. But red vestments are now common, and therefore crosses should be veiled in red, not purple. And this should not be a bright fire engine red, it should be more of an oxblood color. And you can see this is the Ashby Episcopal Church Year Guide, which I have at home. It's a little simpler. It's the same for Sundays. It differs on weekdays. But you can see that during the season of Easter, if you look at that 2, that is in red, and that is the feast of St. Philip and St. James, who are apostles. All the other days in May are white, because all of them are in the season of Easter. And then here you look on June 1st through the 4th are in white because they are still in the Easter season. And the last day of Easter is the day of Pentecost, but that color is red. And immediately after Pentecost, which is June the 5th, you go back to green. And then you do use white for the Sunday after, the first Sunday after Pentecost, because it is Trinity Sunday, and that symbolizes the Holy Trinity and the purity of God. You can see the day I was confirmed is June 24th. That day is white because it is the nativity of St. John the Baptist. That doesn't celebrate his beheading, but it celebrates his nativity. 6 months before Christmas, right? And then also, if you look at the 29th, it's in red, and the Apostles Peter and Paul. That is a feast day of 2 apostles, and it is therefore a red day. Many priests in the Church of England were ordained in that day or the week after, and they refer to that time as Petertide, because they got finished with their degrees at their theological college. That's what they call seminaries. They got their degree, they got their licentiate in theology, and since if everything was hunky-dory, the bishop could ordain them in Petertide, which is the week which would begin on June 29th, and the week following is Petertide. We don't hear that term in this church. In the Oxford movement, the 19th century in the Church of England was a very interesting time. And the Oxford movement was started by people like Edward Bovary Pusey and John Henry Newman. Yes, he was an Anglican priest first. And they started the Oxford movement, and the Oxford movement was a reform movement in the Church of England to try to recover some of the things that were lost in the Reformation. And if you think it's nice to have candles on the altar, or a cross on the altar or above the altar, and for the clergy to wear colored stoles or colored vestments of any sort, and to make the sign of the cross and things like that, you have only the Oxford movement to thank. And the Oxford movement was more influential in the Episcopal Church than it was in the Church of England. The 1979 prayer book, by the way, there used to be a war between high churchmen and low churchmen in the Episcopal Church. Most of the 19th century, that war was going on. And up through, but not including the passage of the 1979 prayer book, that war has now been put to bed. This prayer book put that war to bed because the extreme evangelicals and the extreme Anglo-Catholics kind of met in the middle. And that middle is represented by the 1979 prayer book. Admittedly, it is a lot more Catholic than it is evangelical. The 1979 prayer book is the most Catholic prayer book that has ever been passed by a church of the Anglican Communion, and I'm proud of it. By the way, the use of colored vestments was at one time considered to be popish, like the Pope in Rome, or too Catholic in the Episcopal Church. And in the 19th century, there was a great deal of prejudice against Roman Catholics in this country, especially immigrants. And we really don't wish to bring those bad old days back, to say the very least. And for years and years and years, we have had the Anglican Roman Catholic International Consultation, ARCIC. They are now in about their 4th round. And there's also the Anglican Roman Catholic Consultation in the USA. So we are in ecumenical dialogue with the Roman Catholics. And many of the things that we say together, like the words of the Nicene Creed, with we, of course, and the words of two of the different ways of saying the Agnus Dei, like Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world, have mercy on us. Those are words to those canticles and anthems which we have in common, and they were arrived at ecumenically. Colors are important because colors help us to remember. And there are things in the Christian faith that we really need to remember. And in some cases in the Episcopal Church, there are people who have not really been properly catechized. But let me just give you a few basics. We are sinful human beings and we need to remember our sins, okay? God, the Holy Trinity, has created us, redeemed us, and given us the Holy Spirit. We are admitted to membership in the body of Christ through baptism. That's why in page 298 of this prayer book, we say that baptism is full initiation into Christ's body, the church. And there were people in the Episcopal Church that didn't know what that meant. So they had to pass a General Convention resolution in 1988 and say, you know, full initiation means full initiation. And that means a person that is baptized can receive communion. And when they came out with those big books that we sign, there used to be a section in the book that was called communicants, because the term communicant meant a confirmed person. And now that section is called baptized persons. And the term communicant doesn't mean a confirmed person. The term communicant means a baptized person. And by the way, you know how you join the Episcopal Church if you're a member of another church? You give me your dates of baptism, the date and place of your birth, the date and place of your baptism if you can. And I record it in that big book, which is called the Parish Register. And you have just become a member of the parish, okay? The other thing we need to remember is the sacraments of baptism and the Holy Eucharist, which are the two major sacraments, or dominical sacraments, because they were initiated by our Lord, together with the 5 commonly called sacraments, or sacramental rites, which arose in the history of the church. These sacraments are here to initiate us into the church and to keep us in good standing with God and the church. And we neglect them to our peril. There are some Episcopalians who think that you can be baptized and confirmed, and then you don't really need to get into the church except if you want to see a kid baptized. In Pennsylvania, they used to call me up and they say, well, Father, I want my baby done. To which I would respond, rare, medium, or well done. They didn't want to use the term baptized. It was a little too mystical for them. And of course, there are other people that haven't been in the church in many years, and they refer to baptism as christening, which, yes, that term is used in the Church of England, but you don't find it in our prayer book. So if you get away from the sacraments and you get away from understanding the sacraments and how central they are to the church, basically you are getting away from the Christian faith. Let's be blunt. Colors help us to remember things. Purple helps us to remember penitence, being sorry for our sins, and being willing to turn our lives around. Rose vestments on the 4th Sunday in Lent and the 3rd Sunday of Advent help to lighten up the heaviness of our penitence during Lent and Advent. I'm not sure that anybody these days needs to have their penitence lightened up during Lent, because I don't think very many people do anything. Black vestments, if we use them, symbolize death. White or gold vestments symbolize joy, holiness, and purity. White linens on the altar and for communion vessels also symbolize purity. The nice thing about linen is that you can boil it, right? If you are in a time of pestilence, you can take those linens and you can boil them, and you should. Fire symbolizes fire and blood, namely the Holy Spirit and the blood of Christ and the martyrs. Blue vestments, if we use them, help us to remember the hope of redemption, which we will celebrate at Christmas. And green vestments symbolize growth. And that's the default setting in this to use that nasty term, ordinary time. Vestments. Well, let's skip to about, the first one is the alb and cincture. And you see me wearing an alb and cincture every Sunday. And you see the acolytes wearing an alb and cincture every Sunday. If you wear it to where you have one drop end of your cincture, the drop end goes on your left. I don't know why, it just does. And then Eucharistic vestments. Well, you're familiar with these. Oh, this isn't going to topple over, it might. Green vestments are used. There is a Burson veil, which is very, very plain. I don't think anyone likes it. But anyway, here's a chasuble. And the reason I bought this chasuble while I was in Longview is that they had a matching set for all of the seasons except green. And so I bought it, but the real reason that I bought it is that it's unlined. That's very important. This is, East Texas. This is northern Louisiana. It's hotter than hell. We need unlined chasubles, okay? Let's get real. We need them in the Caribbean too. And this is the stole that you put on. When you put the stole on, you kiss the cross first, and then you put it over your, around your neck. And since Vatican II, we wear the ends of the stole straight down rather than crossing them over our chest, our breast. But anyway, this is a chasuble and stole. You'll notice it doesn't have sleeves. If you see somebody wearing a vestment that looks like it has sleeves, that looks like this, it's a dalmatic. And that's what deacons wear, a dalmatic. A dalmatic. Deacons also wear the stole over the left shoulder, see?
Father Frank, can I ask you something?
You may.
What you have on, the black, is that considered a black vestment?
A cassock is not a vestment.
Oh.
The cassock is the
That's what you
everyday,
have on.
it is the everyday street dress of the clergy.
Oh, okay.
Once upon a time. Once upon a time. This is what you would wear. Frequently in Barbados, well, we didn't wear black. I had a white cassock made in Barbados, and I gave her one of these Whipple. This is a Whipple cassock made in Exeter. And I gave her the one that I had, which was a budget cassock, which is much less expensive than this one. And I gave Mrs. Butcher, Odessa Butcher, known affectionately as Ma Butch, and she made a white cassock just from using that black cassock as a pattern. The reason I have this kind, this is a double-breasted cassock, and yes, it is hotter, but I wear this kind because I used to be an organist, and you can do like this, and you can see your feet. See, if you button it all the way down the front, it's damn difficult to see the pedals, right? I'd like to see where my feet are going to land on the pedals, right? So I've always worn an Anglican-style cassock. Okay, there's another vestment that we use at non-Eucharistic liturgies or at the Eucharist, but this vestment is called a cope. This cope was made by a company called Catholic Liturgicals. It is semicircular. If you laid it out flat, it would be a half circle. And this part of the cope is called the hood of the cope. And then the stripes around here, around the front and around the back of the neck, are called orphreys. When you see stripes on vestments, they're called orphreys. Okay, and this is a stole that goes to it. This is a very flimsy stole, and the reason it is that it's not interlined. Most of the stoles that we have hard or soft Pellon interlining inside the stole, which is why they don't get sort of crumpled up like this, okay? And so you wear a cope. Traditionally in Anglicanism, you wore a cope at a solemn high mass. And for the first part of the mass, before the offertory, you wore a cope. Some people would take the cope off to preach in. But normally, if you wore it at the Eucharist, you would switch to the chasuble at the offertory.
Does it unbutton or does it go over your head?
It's got a clasp in the front.
Okay.
You unclasp it here. This thing, if it's cloth, is called a morse. But this is not a morse. This just has, well, it is sort of a morse. But anyway, it's got a chain, and you unclasp it you put it over your shoulders and then you hook it up again. Okay?
That's very pretty.
Okay. Yeah, I bought this. The reason I bought it is I thought it would be nice to have for Father Chris to wear a chasuble and I to wear a cope, or vice versa, if we had two priests. And then he bought a green one just like this. But anyway, these are vestments that we own ourselves. Now, believe it or not, there are times in the church year, or there are times that we are not celebrating the Eucharist. And so the Eucharist when we're at the Eucharist, we're at the altar, right? Well, sometimes when you do liturgies, you're not at the altar, you're seated in the choir. You're seated nearer the people. If you have the choir in front, you would be seated in choir. And so if you are in choir, if I go to an ordination or an institution of a new rector, I'm not supposed to wear an alb, I'm supposed to wear a surplice. And so I wear this surplice, or I wear one that's even longer and has pointed sleeves. Pointed sleeves are now de rigueur. That's what they wear at Washington Cathedral. Anyway, this is one that I bought my senior year in college. And so this is an Old English surplice, and you can see it has rounded sleeves. See? It's not great to play the organ in, let me tell you. And then in Anglicanism, although not in other churches, I think, if you are a graduate of a college, seminary, or university, when you're seated in choir, and it's not a Eucharist, not a sacrament, you're seated in choir, you would normally wear your hood. And this is a doctoral hood from Northwestern University, and the red, of course, symbolizes theology. So let's see if I can put it on, okay? The thing immediately that happened is the cord that was here broke off. And if you see an Anglican-style cassock, you'll see that there's a button in front, and that's to hook your hood to, see? By the way, the little bag at the end of the doctoral hood is for when people were paid. In other words, the students going to the lecture, you let the students into lecture if they paid, see? And that's what that little bag is for. How about that?
Where you say the bag is?
At the very back.
Well, that's like a little pouch, isn't it?
It is. And then this is a tippet. Now in the Church of England, they probably call this a black scarf or a preaching scarf. In America, we call this a tippet. And so you put your hood on first if you wear a hood, and then you notice I'm not going to kiss it. But this is not a stole. This is the reason you wear this has to do mostly with unheated European churches. See? And so you put it on like this. They used to have pinked ends, and now pinked ends are not de rigueur anymore. And so in the Episcopal Church, we frequently use tippet badges. This is the badge of Seabury Western Theological Seminary, and you can see that our colors are purple and silver gray. And then this is the shield of the Episcopal Church. So if we did an evening prayer service or a morning prayer service, not a Eucharist, this is what I would wear. And if I go to an ordination, then I wouldn't wear a tippet and hood. I would wear the color of the day. And usually the invitation will say clergy red stoles. And that means that we're supposed to wear a red stole rather than a white stole or a green stole or whatever. So anyway, this is what you wear when you're not celebrating the Eucharist.
That's a pretty outfit too.
It's not bad.
If you were to be the minister at commencement at Louisiana Tech, would you wear this regalia?
Last year I was, and I could wear this, but actually I wore the purple doctoral gown.
Oh, okay.
It's our color at Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, not Natchitoches, Louisiana.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to ask you which Northwest.
Our color is Empire Purple, and so it had black stripes, and it had crests, and I wore the red hood for theology. So I wore a doctoral gown, and when am I ever going to wear a doctoral gown, right? But they asked last year, and so they didn't ask me this year, but I did it last year. I remember it was hot.
It's not, yes.
Right. But they have more than one commencement. I did the one on Sunday afternoon last year. But I think they call different clergy. So you could wear this. You could certainly wear this.
That's pretty.
I just think is pretty. And
This is what most Episcopalians remember if they grew up in morning prayer parishes.
Well, now, does this parish, does this church have a set of black vestments?
We do not. I was ordained at St. Margaret's Church in South Shore in Chicago, and we had a solemn set, including a chasuble, a dalmatic, a tunicle, and a cope, and chalice veil, tippet, veil, burson veil, and we had it for all of the seasons. We didn't have blue for Advent, but we sure did have rose for the Rose Sundays, and we certainly did have a black set for funerals.
Now, and this stole that you have around your neck.
It's not a stole, it's a tippet.
Tippet, excuse me. This tippet.
It's a larapipium, but the Brits couldn't say larapipium, and so it became a tippet.
Well, this tippet, that's not considered a part of a black vestment, correct?
No, this is part
Even though
of,
it is black.
when you're wearing stuff like this is choir habit, because you're seated in
Because
choir.
you could be in the choir, couldn't you, if you had
Right.
something like that?
You're seated in choir, this is what you wear.
He wears this when he's not doing
Because
communion.
communion, okay.
If we had a funeral that was not a Eucharist, which I don't favor, I might wear the white cope
Okay.
and wear a cassock and surplice. Or I might just, it depends on how hot it was, I guess. But copes and chasubles are on the hot side. Let me just put it to you diplomatically.
That's very pretty what you have on here. That was like, it's perfect for summer.
Not with this cassock. This
No,
cassock,
with cassocks.
my other two cassocks are being mended, and this is a heavyweight cassock, and it
Oh.
cost about $700. It was custom made in Exeter
Well, it's very pretty.
by Whipples. So it used to be said that in the Anglican Communion, the one thing that bound us all together is that we all wore vestments from Whipples.